Our brains are not designed to 100% of the time work in whatever capacity. And as mothers, we are often constantly going through the to-do list. What time do I need to leave in order to get there on time so that I can take my child, so that my child will be at this activity on time? There is a constant flow in our heads. If you don't step away from all of that, then you're not actually working at capacity. You're not working at your best. And so you are having to compensate for not being able to be your best, which generally probably means you're having to work even harder.
Welcome everyone. This is Ekaterina with Trust Me Mom. Today I have a special guest on my show, Suzanne Brown. Suzanne is a best-selling author. She has a couple books, TED Talk speaker, a marketing executive, and a big advocate for moms and work-life balance. Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ekaterina. I'm so glad to be here. I'm so glad to have this conversation.
Wonderful. So can you share more your story? Definitely you and I crossed our paths from marketing and advertising world, and you have a fascinating journey building a career in marketing. But also, as you became a mom, you recognized that you had to make some changes in your life. So tell us more about your entire journey.
As you shared, my background is in the marketing world. I worked at really large marketing agencies for years, and it's a very cutthroat industry. It's incredibly competitive. For a lot of people, you work really long hours. That's not something that you see in the movies and on TV, but it is incredibly cutthroat. And I happened to work for, as my last employer, I worked for a very balance-friendly company. That was one of the reasons that I went and worked there. And I eventually, over time, I had been there for about 5.5 years, 5 years at that point. I negotiated returning to work when I had our older son in a part-time role. So I literally transitioned to like half-time. So I was working 20 hours a week. And as you can imagine, I got a lot of questions because this was literally in 2011, and part-time was not really a thing that anyone was talking about. To be quite honest, it's still something that a lot of companies struggle with. And I negotiated to a part-time role. Loads of questions from colleagues that were working mothers about what does that even mean? You know, how do you do that? What does it mean? What do your hours look like? Can you slowly tell me the words that you told your boss in order to get her to let you work part-time? And so I didn't realize that there really weren't any resources until I went and I looked for them, because I'm like, this is taking up so much of my time. Let me go find resources to send people to. And I couldn't find anything. And so I continued to have my career, but I started to realize that maybe there was something there. About a year after becoming a mom, I shifted to 100% entrepreneur. I had had a side business at that point for almost 8 years. And I said, okay, I'm going to focus 100% of my time on being a marketing strategist. And then I'm curious about what this other thing could be. And it took me a while to figure out that I needed to write a book, because I started to talk to other working mothers because I wanted to hear their stories. I didn't want somebody to pick up, look at this resource or pick up a book and say, yeah, if I worked for a balance-friendly company in Austin, Texas, I also could easily shift to a part-time role. I didn't want that to be the case. And so I wanted lots of voices, lots of experience, all kinds of different industries and places across the United States. I talked to about 62% women who work for a company, and about 38% who are entrepreneurs. So I wanted all kinds of different voices in that way too. And it's not just, okay, this is about how do you become an entrepreneur that works part-time? And so over time, Mompowerment has evolved. Initially, it was about the successful transition to part-time, and then it became, okay, working mothers in general are interested in what does work-life balance look like. Eventually, I started consulting with companies to help them become more balance friendly. I started giving workshops to their employees so that they could retain great talent, and help support the working moms, mainly working moms, in their organizations. And so it's just morphed over time, addressing industry and marketplace needs along the way. And so it's been an interesting ride. I still have my marketing business, and then I have this work-life balance business. And so no 2 days are the same. It's some days it's a lot, but I find it interesting that no 2 days, for the most part, are the same.
So let's talk more about balance, because it sounds like when girls go to college and they get so inspired and they're so smart and they start building their first career and they have time to invest, it's all going well. And then as soon as they become moms, it seems like their expectations do not meet the reality. They either are not educated what it really takes to take care of the family and have a successful career. So it sounds like it could be challenging to have it all. And you have some references in your book how that traditional definition of having it all, career that is very ambitious, powerful, and then also happy family, it may be somewhat unattainable. So we should switch our focus to what the success is, the definition of success.
Yeah, I think the challenge is that we expect this completely unrealistic 50-50 split each day. I'm going to be able to have this magical moment with my children at the end of each day as we have dinner and get them ready for bed. And in the morning, it's everything is going to flow. And that is not the case. It is not, you feel the pressure of the 50-50 split, in part because we put it on ourselves, and in part society says, like, you need to be a good mom, and this is what a good mom is, and TV programs and movies and whatever. And so I look at work-life balance more over the long term, right? So that might be over the course of a week, or it might be over the course of a month, or a quarter, or the year. There are naturally going to be busy times in our work life, in the work side of work life, right? So it might be that you're launching a product. It might be summer. We can talk more about that. And so it's not a 50-50 split. I think it's more of like a pendulum, right? And so you have to give yourself the space and the permission to allow the pendulum to sway, because there are going to be some days when you must get work done, right? Like, you got to get it done. And then there are going to be other days when you get that call from the school nurse of your child just broke his arm, you know? And as a mom who has a 13-year-old who had 5 broken bones before he was 10 years old, I felt like I got that phone call a lot. And he was just a super active, this was my preemie. He's a super active kid. He doesn't pay attention to what he's doing. He's really fast. And sometimes that leads to injuries on the playground, right? But if I was so focused on everything being perfect each day, I would have been very frustrated with getting that phone call from the nurse, instead of being able to say, okay, my child needs me right now, so I'm stepping away because I have planned my time. I know what I need to shift. I know what my absolute requirements for today are. And I can be present for my child in the doctor's office, and we can figure out a quick solution here. Is it a broken bone? Do we need to go to a specialist? Do we have to go to ER? Whatever the case is. But there are things that you can do in order to create a more balanced lifestyle, right? And step away from this ridiculous 50-50 split each day that often that is the image that we have in our head before we become mothers, that are actually continuing to work, you know?
Right. And also, I think it's important to add some time for mom, for herself, because as we talk about this pendulum, it's somebody else needs your time, your energy, and your attention, whether you need to finish your job or help with your kids. But where is that space for you to have that downtime for you personally so you can recharge, recover, rebuild your oxytocin, and be loving and caring again?
And I think that is an important thing because I think a lot of working mothers, especially, think about self care as selfish, right? And the thing is, if you don't have self care built into your routine, you're not actually at your best. Not as a mom, not as an employee, not as a sister, a neighbor, a friend, like all of those things, right? And so it doesn't have to be a spa day every Saturday, right? Like that also unrealistic. And so the way I like to look at self care is how do you build self care into your routine every day or every few days, right? It becomes a daily or a weekly thing, and it can be anything, right? Um, it can be meditating as your day starts. It can be reading a book. It can be, literally just stepping away for 5 minutes. It can be making a normal moment more luxurious. We all need, like, getting a shower is not self care, but having a bubble bath instead, or having a shower where you get products from your favorite spa and you take a little bit longer shower and everything is a little more luxurious, like that can be a moment of self care, right? And so you build in these small moments of self care throughout your day, and you feel like your cup is full, right? You have those moments of engaging with your significant other and with your best friend so that you can, have a phone call and just feel like you're supported, right? There's so many different ways that it can look. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't have the monthly pedicure, but you can't rely on the monthly pedicure to help you feel like you are as important as everybody else, right? A monthly pedicure is not going to cut it.
Right.
So
Yes.
it's having all of these other moments that give you what it is that you need. And for all of us, it's going to look a little bit different. But part of that also is being able to hand off your child or your children and knowing how you can actually build these things in, right? Like it can be first thing in the morning before everybody wakes up, like having that moment and sitting down and like enjoying your cup of coffee or tea. Like I'm a tea drinker, and like journaling. And that's before like the house even wakes up, right? Or it could be at lunchtime, or it could be in the afternoon. Like, I mean, you just have to see what works for you. There's not like this is exactly how you do it, right? It's whatever makes the most sense for you and really helps you feel like your cup is actually full so that you're not constantly focused on everybody else, whether it's at work or at home. And then you're just like, I mean, none of this is helping me, right? And it's like, well,
Right. Yes.
but that gives you the ability to be at your best as a mother, to be at your best at work, to be, a better significant other and a better friend. Like it's really hard to do well in all of the roles that you have and to feel like you're thriving if you're constantly doing everything for everyone else without ever doing something for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of women fall into that trap. A lot of women want to be overachievers and be pleasers. So basically, they don't want to be people pleasers, but that's how they behave. They feel they need to finish all assignments and all tasks. And at the end of the day, they don't leave time and space to take care of themselves. And that's how they burn out.
Yeah. And I think here's an example so that people, so the women who are listening can understand. If you look at something and you keep looking at it to improve it, right? Like you've written a report or a white paper or even a document for your manager that your manager is going to use with his or her manager. When you look at it the first time, you can start to see mistakes, right? But the more you look at it without stepping away, the less you actually see the problems, right? The less you can focus on the thing. Your brain just loses the ability to actually continue to improve what it is that you're looking at, right? But when you step away and you go have lunch, or you go take a walk, or somebody comes in, if you're in an office, somebody comes and interrupts you, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but like they come and they talk to you for 15 minutes for whatever, right? And then you go and you look at the document again. You actually start to find mistakes again, right? Like you're able to improve that document. Your brain is not, our brains are not designed to 100% of the time work in whatever capacity, right? And as mothers, we are often constantly going through the to-do list. What time do I need to leave in order to get there on time so that I can take my child, so that my child will be at this activity on time, right? Like there is a constant flow in our heads. And so if you don't step away from all of that, then you're not actually working at capacity, right? You're not working at your best. And so you are having to compensate for not being able to be your best, right? Which generally probably means you're having to work even harder. And so if you are able to just step away, you become more productive. You become better at all of the things that you're doing. And so you have to embrace what can sometimes be counterintuitive.
Definitely. So let's talk a little bit more about how women can create more balance at their work. It is very impressive that you were able to negotiate part-time at the marketing agency. It seems that after pandemic, some employers became a little bit more flexible, and definitely people are looking for that flexibility, but still it could be a challenge for many people. So what are your tips and strategies for women negotiating more flexibility, or maybe part-time work at the corporate setting that typically will be 40 plus hours?
Right. Okay. So when you are trying to combine work and life, and this is on the work side, and you want to be able to negotiate, maybe it's continuing to work from home if your employer shifted to remote, but now they're trying to call people back. Or it could be, maybe you do want to work part time, or maybe you want to do a job share. The thing that I think is the most important is when you go to have a conversation with your manager or with your senior leaders, you want it to be a strategic conversation. This is not a casual, like, oh, it would be great if I could just continue to work from home, right? You want a strategic conversation, and ideally, you want to create a win-win, right? What does your employer, your team, your manager, whoever get out of it, and and with you getting the thing that you want, right? So you get to be remote. Okay, well, maybe that means that you start working earlier, right? So that you're able to do XYZ, so that by the time your colleagues come in, you've already done this part of the thing and they can hit the ground running even faster, right? So it can be, it really depends on the role and the company and what it is that you do, and all these kinds of things, right? But you can figure out how to essentially create a win-win, right? So that you are getting to continue to work remotely and they are getting XYZ out of it, or they're getting X out of it. I do not recommend that win is that you don't leave. That is not, ultimatums don't always work the way that you would like them to work. For some, it absolutely can be an ultimatum, but for, I think, the vast majority, it is not, right? And so you have to figure out what is that win that they can have. And that might require you to do some reflection on what does that really mean? What does that look like? And even talking to your colleagues. And I think that that's the other thing that women don't do enough, because so often we feel that we are so alone. I'm the only one who is challenged by this. I'm the only one who is struggling with this. And chances are, if you go and you talk to your fellow mother colleagues, they might be dealing with the same kinds of challenges. And so you can also go to your management, whether that's your manager or your department head or, senior leader, whoever is the right person to receive this, and be able to say, here's what we collectively are struggling with, and that might be through you as a team. It might be through an employee resource group, through an ERG. But being able to ask for what you need as a collective group, not me, Suzanne, what is, how good a negotiator am I? But, us as a team, as a department, there are a lot more voices all of a sudden. And then your business leaders are like, okay, how can I solve this challenge, right? Even better is if you go to them and you say, we're struggling, XYZ could fix that, right? It could be literally the times of day that you work. So maybe it's that you do what's essentially considered a split shift, right? So you work for a certain amount of time, and then you can go pick up your kids from school, and then you hop back on and you work for another period of time. It could be in the benefits that they give, right? And so you go and you do some research and you say, hey, our competitors are offering this kind of benefit to their employees. Here is the kind of company that offers this. We would love to have that kind of benefit here instead of this one over here that no one is using, within our department. And so it's even better if you can help figure out the solution so that they don't say, oh, okay, you're struggling with all of this, and you're trying to set it up so that this is what they give you and this is what they give you instead, right? So when you can create that, and I think the other thing to keep in mind in all of this at work is you have to have boundaries, right? It all starts with boundaries, because if you don't have boundaries, and not just boundaries, but your the non-negotiables, right? If you don't know what those things are when you go to negotiate, when you go to ask for what you need, when you go to have a strategic conversation, it's really hard to backtrack and say, oh, this is not working for my non-negotiables. Can we try that again? Right? I don't want to say that you have only one shot to make a change, but it's really hard to keep changing, right? And so if you know what your boundaries are, if you know what those non-negotiables are, you are able to better negotiate what it is that you actually need, right?
And can you give us some examples with boundaries and non-negotiables?
Yeah. So a non-negotiable could be, I want to make sure that I have dinner with my family 3 days a week, right? It could be, I want to drop off my kids in the morning to school or to daycare, right? It can literally be anything. From a boundary perspective, it could be, we have no tech zones and times in our household. Like, for example, unless there is a work emergency, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, there are no phones at the table, right? We eat dinner without cell phones out, actually even without cell phones at the table. And as someone who now has a 13-year-old, he knows he does not bring a phone to the table, right? And so it is, that's a boundary, right? Of like, I am not at dinner time. I'm not going to have my phone out, right? Or it could be, you don't take, you don't have technology in your bedroom, whatever the case is, right? And for those people who hear this, for those moms who are listening and they say, but what if there's a work emergency, right? Here is what I very much recommend. Define the emergencies with your team, right? What is an emergency? What is the protocol to deal with the emergency? Because if you get in the habit of, for example, checking your email all the way until 10 o'clock p.m., I do not recommend this, but I absolutely know that some people do. They do this all the time, right? That's not unusual. This is literally a daily occurrence. Um, and somebody sends you an email at 9:45, okay? And you think, oh my gosh, I've got to respond, right? But what you don't know is that Ekaterina was out of the office today. You were out of the office at a conference. And so you are hopping on because you know that I needed something by tomorrow. I didn't know you had a conference. So I need this. This is just in how your workflow was. You weren't able to take care of this before you went to the conference. You are literally giving me what I need so that I can do my job tomorrow, right? But I don't know that. I don't know what has happened today. Maybe you're going on vacation tomorrow and you're trying to get something to me before you leave so that you don't have to worry about work while you're on vacation, right? You have no idea. And so if we agree to what is an emergency and what I have to respond to, right? What is the thing that I must respond to? That what is the emergency? What's the protocol? Everyone agrees to it as far as like your colleagues, your manager, if it has to go all the way up to your senior leaders, obviously your clients, and that can be internal or external. If there are vendors who might touch a project, like whoever, but all of you agree to the same thing. And then okay, I need to respond to this right now, right? Like I need to address this right now. Or is it oh, great, I have that in my email. I'll be able to work on this tomorrow morning, right?
Right.
And I think that way you're not just constantly responding to the things coming your way. You are planning your time. You're strategically addressing the things that need to be addressed. And that changes how you are able to manage your life, right? It is no longer okay, what's coming at me? Okay, what do I deal with? You are actually intentionally responding to things and intentionally doing your work, and you can just better manage your time instead of that constant back and forth that is probably unnecessary. And I will also say, if you have so many emergencies where you are constantly being interrupted in your normal life, that's a bigger issue. Something else needs to be addressed as far as like your colleagues or your manager or your client. But that can also be a red flag for you to recognize that needs to be something that you change.
Right. It almost feels like in an MBA program, there should be a course on boundaries and time management and helping people to create better workflows, because what you're describing is very common for many industries, especially in the corporate world.
Yeah. I think part of the challenge of time management is you're never really taught time management, right? And so when you are, a lot of the habits that we have throughout, like for your lifetime, literally is created when you are like an adolescent, 12, 13, 14, but you're never actually taught how to manage your time. And so you figure it out, sometimes you stumble through it. For most of us, it is not, it's not natural. It's not like, oh, I was born with this ability, right? Like, no. And so you figure it out in high school, and then you often will change some things in college, and then you go and you have your first job. And if you have a manager who struggles with time management, struggles with saying no, struggles with boundaries, that becomes behavior that you mimic, right? They become a model for your behavior. And then you go and you take that with you to the next job, and then to the next job, and as you might move up in the ranks. And so, and then when you become a mother, all of a sudden, there are all of these things that you have to manage, and you are in charge of another human being. And so there's even more that and then there are elements of just your general approach to parenting, on top of how do you manage the work life balance. And so there are so many layers that if you don't have that foundation,
Hmm.
you really are just you're reacting to what is presented to you and what's thrown at you, instead of intentionally taking action.
Right.
And so if there, for those who are listening and watching, recognize that you are not unique. You're unique in other ways, but this is not one of those ways. If you say, I don't understand why I'm struggling with time management here, right? It's very normal to struggle with that.
That's a very good observation.
So let's talk about life being a little bit different when it comes to a day off when you might not have the day off but your kids do, or summer break or winter break or Thanksgiving break, like all of these breaks, right? Because sometimes it really feels like there's a lot of breaks. I think the thing to recognize as a working mother is it is okay for you to shift how you do things when these breaks happen, right? I was actually at a networking session, and there was a woman there who was talking about how she struggled so much during the summer because she's all about time blocking, right? And so, time blocking, it's where you work on like things in a large block of time, because it can be hard to shift between activities. So it's like you only work on email, you only do research, you only return phone calls, right? And you just do that in blocks. But in the summer, or any time when there are kids around who you don't when you know don't normally have kids around, your day often becomes choppier, right? And you're having more interruptions from children. Um, maybe even if they have friends in the neighborhood, like they're knocking at the door and that interrupts whatever. But the idea, your time becomes choppy. It's really hard to sit and focus and time batch. And so maybe that is a great time for you to consider something like Pomodoro Technique, where you work in 25-minute increments and then you have a 5-minute break, and then you work in another 25 increment and then you have a 5-minute break. And that way your kids can also recognize when they can come and disturb you, right? When they can bug you. And that can be that you set a timer on your oven for 25 minutes. And when that timer goes off, your child or your children know they can come in, knock on the door and say, hey, mom, will you look at the picture that I drew, or whatever, right? Or they can come in and say, hey, can I go to the neighbor's house for the next 2 hours? Like whatever the case is. So there's that kind of thing. I think the other thing is that I talk about this in my books and I talk about this a lot. You want to be able to get help, because thinking that all of a sudden you can have a 2-year-old who isn't normally at home, and you're working at home, that you're going to be able to manage all of these things and it's just going to be super smooth, right? It is unlikely. And so being able to get help, but that help can look a lot of different ways. It can be that you have like a neighborhood kid who's a mother's helper. It can be, maybe you do have a nanny, right? Or maybe you can talk to somebody who's at the daycare and they can come in and watch your child. But it doesn't have to be a professional. It can literally be the kid who's 11 years old, right? But the other thing that you can do is you can trade off with another mom, and so that way, maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the morning, I have the kids, her kids and my kids in my house, right? So let's be real. It's easier when there is more than one child,
Right.
so that
Yes.
your child is otherwise occupied. And you might have to do a little bit of planning the night before of like, what will that actually look like? What are some of the things that you all can do so that you're not like what was that sound? So that you're not disturbed by things that you weren't that you weren't planning for. But that also gives you the chance for you to have focused time where you are able to just work. I shouldn't say just work, where you are only working instead of working and mothering. So you switch off, and I promise you, you are not alone in your neighborhood of, oh, my kids are at home and they aren't normally at home, and that can be any season, summer, whatever, Labor Day or whatever the case is. So some of those things can help just rethink what time can look like and what actual resources you have available.
Right, right. And I want to encourage our listeners and readers and viewers to check out your book. And I think you have another one that came out recently.
I do.
So there are a lot of
the red one. Yeah, the red one was
Yes.
the first one. So there's the red one. There's the red one, and then there's the aqua colored one. But they're all about practical tips, right? And that's what I try to focus on. Practical tips, whether it's to my email list or whether it's in the books or whether it's in the videos that I do, because I don't want, in looking at the resources that I created and continue to create, I didn't want somebody to walk away and say, that's a really good idea, but what does that actually look like? What does that mean? How am I supposed to take that and do something with it? And so I wanted lots of practical tips so that you could literally turn around tomorrow, like after you read it, and like immediately start using something.
That's perfect. So thank you so much, Suzanne. You definitely shared some very useful and practical tips, and there is way more in the books. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I hope that this was really helpful.